seems like some sort of subliminal switch.
The playoffs are very different than the regular season.
The most uncomfortable thing ever.
If it could go right, it did go right.
If it wasn't for Lamar Hunt, Philip Anschutz, and Robert Kraft, this league would not be here.
Hey folks, what's going on? This is Scott Churchson with Stream Punk Soccer. Joining me as always is USL sports writer Mr. Bill Akins. And joining us today for Inside the Call, he's been here before. We appreciate the time yet again. But Columbus Crew play-by-play man, Mr. Chris Doran, to talk the team, talk the changes, talk some league changes, because there's been some massive changes over there with the new commissioner, and frankly, life, the universe, and everything. So, sir, how the heck are you?
I'm great, thanks. Scott and Bill, nice to see you guys, and thanks for having me on the show.
Our privilege, our privilege.
Yep. Nice to see you too.
Yeah, so let's pick this up right now. By the way, good win last night. You know, Leagues Cup, 3-1 win over Atlas there. Talk a little bit about that win there. Talk a little bit about the changes this season and, frankly, how the team right now is just battling for that playoff spot.
Well, as you guys both know, to know that there are 16 games left in the MLS regular season, there's a lot that can happen. And here we are sitting in the middle of the trade window, so who knows what the personnel looks like from day to day, week to week. But it looks like the Columbus Crew have really settled in on what will be the roster to finish out the regular season. And we are upbeat about it, to say the very least. Bryce Mendez is a brand new designated player, takes in the place of Diego Rossi, who departed from Monterrey, as Monterrey builds up their roster of former MLS players, and has stepped right in and picked up where Rossi left off. He scored on a set-piece goal from 25 yards out Saturday to tie the game late against Inter Miami in Miami. Mm-hmm. And then last night in the Leagues Cup game came in again as a second-half sub, trying to build up his fitness minutes, and in the run of play with Taha Brun, was able to get his second goal in as many appearances. So we're upbeat about that and some of the other roster changes. As it relates to the Leagues Cup, you can't ask for a better start. I think you guys understand this. It's a young tournament, mm-hmm. But what we know from having seen this phase one knockout round format that was instituted last year, you got to get ahead of the ball quickly. And you lose a game and you're pretty much out of the conversation. So to have 3 games at home, to have a relatively healthy roster, it was incumbent upon the Crew and interim head coach Laurent Courtois to get the result last night, and that's exactly what they did.
Good, bud.
So I wanted to ask you, what I've been following this team for a while now. What young Crew players that are kind of up and coming do you view as major storylines? I mean,
it's.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Putting him on
Chase Adams. Yeah, sorry. Like Chase Adams, Tristan Brown. I mean, I kind of look at those guys as kind of, I don't know. They're young talents, homegrown. Some of them are homegrown, But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, Bill, one of the things that we do with the Crew, and I say we, I'm not employed by the Crew directly, so but entrenched the way I am, I tend to do that. The academy program runs the same system that Crew 2 runs, that the first team runs. Yeah. These players are interchangeable. They learn a system, and they can perform within that system. And so when we give players an opportunity to make an appearance during a friendly, for example, like against Burnley a couple of weeks ago, mm-hmm. You don't see the drop-off in the understanding of the system. Where you see the drop-off is the acclimation to the speed of play. Yeah. Where you see the drop-off is in some form of the physicality, although Columbus is not known as a physical team. Right. And where you see I think the difference technically is that the execution of the more experienced players is just slightly sharper. But you do see an understanding. And so when you ask me what players do we see as up and coming as it relates to young players, the first living, breathing example I have for you is Taha Brun, mm-hmm. Who is, as you know, has gone through every stage of the youth national team program, and is a starter for us as a forward or as a midfielder, has been exquisite in his adaptation this year. Was favored by the original coach of the season, Henrik Rudstrom, and is certainly favored by the interim coach now, Laurent Courtois, because Courtois came to the Columbus Crew back in 2019 when Taha Habrun was 12 years old. And he was watching this kid play with the U14s and then so on and so forth. So Courtois is familiar with, the core principles of the Columbus Crew way. He went away to Montreal briefly and came back as an assistant coach with Rudstrom, but he has always held those principles near and dear. What he's also come to understand, having been with another club, is that you can offer variations as long as you don't stray too far from the way Columbus wants to play. And that's in possession, front foot, counter press, creating chances, entries into the box, and finishing plays in the attacking third. So we're seeing players who are coming up under that philosophy become available for a friendly or perhaps for training and short stints with the full team, like we saw with Tarun Karamanchi. He was an MLS draft pick last year, was terrific in preseason training, and unfortunately injured his ankle. He had to take several weeks off. Came back, was in Crew 2 under Federico Higuain, longtime member of the Columbus Crew roster. And Federico Higuain, like Laurent Courtois, is employing the same principles. And then Tarun Karamanchi is able to get acclimated, and now he's training with the first team during the World Cup break. All of a sudden, he makes an appearance in a friendly, and 2 days later, he's signing a permanent contract with the first team. These are the types of things where the general manager, the technical director can look out over the balcony on the training field, and they can look at the Crew 2 training sessions, and they are covering the same coaching points as the first team is. And they can say from that balcony, number 15 is a guy that we need to keep an eye on. We just need him to be physically more whatever. It could be get more muscle on his bones, let him get a little bigger, help him to get faster, more time in the weight room, whatever. But this guy is showing us what we need to see. They do the same thing with the academy teams when the academy teams train at the training center in the afternoon. They're watching the three guys that they've been told to watch, and those kids are training in the same system that the first team's training in. And those philosophies are philosophies that they can carry through into their first team experience. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, Bill. We've got Tristan Brown, who was terrific when he was a young club player with the Michigan Wolves, which is a club academy affiliate. He came to Columbus. His parents actually drove him 2.5, 3 hours to and 3 hours back to training in Columbus from Michigan so that he could join the academy and then Crew 2 and now find his way into a first team situation. He's not gotten any playing time this year, but he's going to make his crack at it probably within the next year.
That's the funny thing about it. Nobody ever talks about this. When you see players work their way up through the academy, the sacrifice that a lot of times happens from parents in this case, to have to drive that amount, and the tolls that are involved, and the gas mileage, because gas is $4 a gallon right now, and don't see that getting any better anytime soon. So the physical toll that it takes on the family, but also the love and dedication, I think, really to commit to that, and that kind of a payoff is amazing. Now honestly, Scott, it also leads to the conversation about those who have and those who don't, because this is the big debate in youth soccer right now. It's that, Tristan Brown, I don't know what the affluence level is of his background, his family's background, but there aren't a lot of parents that can put $75 worth of gas in the car every day, and 3 days a week drive your kid to another time zone to practice soccer for 2 hours and then drive you back. By the same token, there aren't a lot of high school students who can sustain that schedule and maintain good grades in high school. So, good on Tristan Brown for not only being a quality player, but a quality student in that regard. In Aiden Morris's case, who is a longtime Crew Academy member,
He had to move from Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Mm.
He left his family, became a part of a billet family, which is a host family here in Columbus. And with that host family was able to establish relationships not just within that family's network, but detach from his own birth family
Mm.
and continue a run up through high school, taking classes on campus at Ohio Health Performance Center, and eventually getting himself to a point where he is today, which is, a couple of MLS Cup championships, an All-Star nod, and now starting midfielder at Middlesbrough in the championship.
And that's, it's funny you mentioned that, because I know Zlatan has come out with regards to Landon Donovan has talked about the youth development movement, and someone told me the other day that they couldn't get their child into a traveling soccer team because it was $3,200 a year, and the average person can't pull that kind of coin off. And now I think, my opinion, correct me if you see differently, please, I suspect over the course of the next 10, 15, 20 years, that's going to change. But for right now, it is a very tough situation versus what, say, for example, Europe has, where for the most part, it's, you pay for insurance in case something happens, fine. But it's such a systematic approach that's affordable to the family. Whereas here, you have to have, you used affluency to be able to pay for this, which is why a lot of kids end up phasing out and going into a different direction later on.
Yeah, I think the infrastructure in Europe is way different than the United States. When Germany has a youth tournament, or when even France or Spain or England has a youth tournament, geographically speaking, we're talking about a very small space relative to the United States. I know my son, even when he played, when there was a national tournament, we're going to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I don't know why we're doing it. But, and we lived in Indiana. That's like 1,000,000 miles away for us. That's an 11-hour drive. But that's where the national tournament was. And the same with my grandson. His national tournament was in, just some other state outside of Indiana. It was just ridiculous that these kids are being carted around like that. So we go back to the point, first of all, that if you don't have the $3,500 a year for your kid to play soccer, then you have to find another alternative. And hopefully your market has got that second, less expensive alternative. And then on top of that, you have to have the free time from your job to be able to transport that child to and from. And sometimes that's not reasonable either. We're lucky that the academy programs with the MLS teams are no charge. But to take a country as big as the United States and to say that our goal in the next 10 years is to make soccer free on someone else's tab for kids who want to play, I think is unrealistic.
Yeah. Agreed. And I think it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But at the same time, you look at the overall average age of the fan bases, baseball, NFL. I mean, basketball and soccer, I think, are fairly close in age as far as fandom goes. But that should give at least some degree of hope going into the next, 10, 15, 25 years, that soccer might end up becoming a sport that's more mainstream than it is now. Credit to, obviously, MLS in the last 30 years to get to where it is now. But, I do have a degree of hope that maybe it'll get a little easier going forward. But for right now, yeah, that's too much on a family that's just trying to figure out how to pay their electric bill.
Do you think soccer is not mainstream? Is that what you think?
It's not one of the, I don't see it as one of the big three. You look at, we'll call it soccer. I get dumped on by Europe by calling it soccer, and I hear that all the time. But let's call it what it is in this case. But when you look at like the NFL, basketball, and NBA, I've always seen that for some reason that here in the U.S., typically speaking, I think people gravitate towards sports that were basically invented here. Soccer, as big as it is worldwide, hockey is number 4 overall. You got the Blue Jackets, I got the Devs, but the Olympics, rugby, cricket, these sports that are huge outside of the U.S. don't have as much of a footprint here. And right now, I think the big 3 really are football, baseball, and NBA. And baseball, I don't know, maybe it's on its, I don't know if it's phasing itself out a little bit right now. And I think, as I get off my soapbox for a second here, I think if the lockout ends up happening with baseball next year, soccer can really make a footprint, though. That's just my take.
I don't even know why we're having this conversation, Scott. Just to be respectful
Okay,
here,
please.
there's something for everybody. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know how it is that lacrosse is such a popular sport
Yep.
in high school on the East Coast,
Right.
but it is.
We cover a lot of
You know,
lacrosse on this side too. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So there's that. There's the conversation about the Big Tent and the Democrats. Bringing in the Democrat Socialist Party
Hmm.
as well as traditional Democrats.
Hmm.
They say it's a big tent. I think we have a big tent in the United States when it comes to professional sports and youth sports, and I don't think you necessarily need to, chomp away at what market share each sport has,
Hmm.
because at the end of the day, in my opinion, professional sports is merely entertainment.
Hmm.
If they're not going to a professional soccer game, they're probably spending $20 a ticket at a theater that serves you dinner.
Hmm.
The same could be said for an NBA game or an NFL game. And I think some of these leagues polarize themselves with the way they position themselves in the public marketplace with issues outside of the sport themselves.
Mhm.
And that's maybe where the difference is. But I am not of the opinion that soccer is not mainstream in this country. And I think it's just a matter of,
I
where
think
people
it will
spend their
get
time
there,
and
though.
money.
Just like I said on the youth movement side of it, I just think it's going to take a few more years before it really cracks in.
Do you know how many leagues or clubs I could sign up for if I had a kid in soccer in Westerville, Ohio?
Fair.
I mean, there are opportunities everywhere. If that's not mainstream, I don't know what is.
Fair. Okay,
Now,
that's fine.
if you're in the middle of northern Idaho at the border of Canada,
Hmm.
then maybe there aren't as many rec leagues available for your 7-year-old kid. But it's such a cheap sport to run. Why is pickleball so popular? I mean, do you
Mm.
guys play pickleball?
No, but I've always been bad with anything that involves like a net. I have been brutal at in general.
Okay.
My wife
Pickleball's
occasionally plays pickleball, but I do not. I'm a
okay. Well,
spectator.
I don't know if pickleball's in the mainstream or not, but more adult injuries occur from pickleball than any
Right.
other activity.
Eh.
Yep.
And that's because we got a bunch of old people who haven't been active for a long time,
Yeah.
whacking at a paddle and a ball.
Right.
So, is pickleball mainstream? I don't know if it is or not. I'm not really sure. But it seems to be talked about a lot, and you can see the national competitions on ESPN5 anytime you want.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to turn it over to Bill in a second. I want to get your opinion on this, and I like what you've been saying. I really do. I appreciate it. Do you think soccer or NHL? Which do you think is bigger right now? I'd almost make the argument maybe soccer is bigger of the two.
I don't know. I think comparison is the thief of joy. Who cares?
Yeah.
I love soccer,
All right.
and I don't care about hockey. I love to go to a game. I wish the CBJ hadn't laid off my good friend Bob McElligott as a radio announcer in lieu of simulcasting television audio, but that's what the decision they made. I still love Bob, and I occasionally like a good hockey game, but not very often. I don't know who's bigger. But whatever MLS is going to do with their new commissioner, if we can transition,
Please.
better be strategically right on the mark for this league to meet its goals. And it sounds like growing from 30 teams is not really in the forefront, but maintaining and sustaining a healthy exposure to the broadest possible market via the media deal is going to be one of the priorities for the new commissioner.
Do you think? First of all, I guess in this case here, what's your take on Larry Berg? I mean, do you like the deal? What challenges do you think?
My take on what? With Apple?
No, not with the Apple deal. We know where that's going to go in this case, but with being a new commissioner, obviously comes massive challenges. I think Don Garber has done a phenomenal job over 30 years. Him, Robert Kraft, to get it where it is. But now to take over the reins of it, I think provides its own interesting challenges in its own regard. Because there's no floor. So
yeah, but keep in mind this guy's been a part of every internal meeting
sure.
ever since he became an investor. So he knows exactly what the league is up against. He knows exactly what the owners want, and he's going to work on behalf of the owners, just like Don Garber did. That's what commissioners do in leagues. And so, hopefully make all the right decisions so that the fan bases have their expectations met. but put the ownership groups in positions where they can continue to be successful with their massive investments in this growing league.
Nice. Bill?
Okay, so I had a question about coaches. So, we all know that coaching philosophies, shape the team's identity, right? I guess my question is, how has your approach over the years calling crew matches evolved when you've had guys like Wilfried, Nancy, Courtois?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question, Bill. And I think when you ask play-by-play guys that question, especially the radio broadcasters, because we cover every touch,
Right.
you do start to feel comfortable in a certain style of play, and I think I'm a friend of Caleb Porter's. Okay, so I'm not being critical here at all. I wouldn't be critical of any of the coaches, but I would say this. I think Caleb Porter's style fit an older style that I was very familiar with in the way Columbus played. It's very successful, had great great players, won the 2020 MLS Cup and the 2021 Campeones Cup. So I was very comfortable with that. When Wilfried Nancy came on board in 2023, it became way more fluid, where possession and not giving up possession became the priority. So I knew possession, lose the ball, counter press, possession, back, possession. My call started to get really rhythmic, and my comfort level was very high in that style of play, except for the nights when we would play the Red Bulls, and the counter press from the Red Bulls was excruciating. Balls were popping up everywhere. Passes weren't being connected. I knew it was going to be a long night for the Columbus Crew against the Red Bulls when I was out of breath after 20 minutes of calling a Red Bull Columbus game. As you know, the Red Bulls have sort of throttled back a bit from that. Philadelphia's adopted some of that. So when the Columbus Crew style is being interrupted by the opponent, I know it by the amount of breath it takes for me to call a half of a game. Since Laurent Courtois returned to the team as an interim head coach, I've noticed in the last 5 games that the rhythm is back, and it is way more enjoyable to call these games because the string of possession, the ability to work in non-game related announcements in a string of passes and then instantly rejoin the game after 7 seconds. Very, very easy, very predictable. And so it's been delightful that way. Now, what I can also tell you, Bill, is that if there's too much of that, it means that Columbus is not entering the final third of the field to, let a sequence of attack unfurl. And that can be really disconcerting too, because I get tired of holding on to the ball and I'm not even on the field. So we have got to continue to see entries into the box, entries into the final third, and way more efforts at shooting. And I think we're starting to see an increase in that. So that's a real positive for us at this point.
Anything else there?
No, that answers it. Yeah, that's. Yeah.
I get, it's funny where, you've been doing this such a long time now that, and I talk to, like, for example, Joe Totino, who obviously has, 30 years of his own time, the vivid memories that you've got, and even, like I said, even the MLS Cup being, a few years back at this point, it's always funny with something like this, how vivid a memory can be, and yet stunning how far back it can be at the same time.
Oh my gosh, you're telling me. And you're not as old as I am. So yeah, you think back on the 2020 MLS Cup and the COVID era. I mean, with the Anthony Fauci hearing last week, I'm thinking about the pandemic, and that seems like forever ago.
6 years.
But it really wasn't. And we won an MLS Cup in the pandemic. And that whole season, I mean, I've been walking through the house all summer just sharing with my wife, hey, do you remember when? And that was only 5 or 6 years ago. But, I called a few games from my living room couch. because we weren't able to have access to facilities during that period of time. So, yeah, you're right, Scott. It wasn't that long ago, but there are vivid memories of what we had to do to accommodate the circumstances.
And I think, honestly, the challenge, I think, of also broadcasting remote, and Bill and I were talking about this just prior, I think in 2020, I don't think it really mattered any because people welcomed the distraction. And the
That's a good point.
to just have sports back in, and baseball, and obviously soccer, and all these kind of sports here, to have that kind of a distraction, given how prominent, I guess is the phrase I'll use in this case, COVID was, and how much it was in our faces, and how much the isolation and the challenges that came therein. I think there was a challenge for you. I think there's always, I always feel, maybe I'm wrong, that there's more of a challenge to have to broadcast remotely than in person anyway. But it didn't really matter there because it was something that I think we needed, and we needed big at that time.
Yeah, I love your assessment that it was a bit of a distraction for the casual viewer to see the play-by-play guy for baseball on ESPN sitting in his Barca lounger at home in front of his computer. It made sense given the information that we were being handed, and take argument with that whole period of time as much as you want, but the accommodations that were made technology-wise for people to pull that off, I think, was pretty impressive and have carried over because we don't see as many people traveling. We don't see, broadcasters. We see, the Big Ten Network had begun remote broadcasts even prior to 2020. And so when I returned in 2021 to the Big Ten Network to cover men's soccer, we were sitting in a studio and our monitor had 4 different camera angles on it. We called games off those monitors. So that was a really unique situation. But even to this day, many of the broadcasts of Olympic sports on campus are done remotely if they're not done locally with student staff. They go ahead and do it with a bigger staff, and they do it from Chicago.
And speaking of the Olympics, obviously that's coming here in 2028. Olympic soccer will be here in 2028 as well, which is a big deal. Some of it coming to Etihad Park in Queens. So I'm going to push to try and get that if I can.
Good.
Because we have access to some of the other Olympic stuff. So I'm going to see what I can do there. But more just back to the regular point, you look at the squad that you've got now, and you look at the changes that have happened here. Arston obviously on his way out. Where do you see this team going in what I'm going to call it the second half of the season at this point?
Yeah, legit second half of the season. Well, we're in the semifinals of the U.S. Open Cup, and that's a big deal. That quarterfinal against New York City was a good game. New York City had beaten us 10 days prior by a score of 3-0. Hannes Wolf with a hat trick. He's extraordinary. I like him. I understand he may want to get out of New York, but I do love him.
Yeah.
And then we hosted them for the quarterfinal and beat them 1-0 on a Max Arston goal. His first goal in U.S. Open Cup play. So happy to get over that, knowing that it was interim head coach Laurent Courtois' first game in charge. He had 2 days of tactical prep for that game and was able to log that victory. I certainly hope he'll be around for the semifinal. I don't know that the crew is looking for a head coach right now. They may have feelers out. I think in doing your diligence as an executive, you probably have to have a short list. But right now, Laurent Courtois is giving them no reason to move forward with anyone else but him. So I'm anxious to see what happens in that game against Orlando. Orlando, of course, with Antoine Griezmann, formerly of Atletico Madrid. He's on the roster for the Open Cup. We've got Bryce Mendez. Bryce Mendez was with Real Sociedad and beat Atletico in the Copa del Rey final this past spring. So those two guys going up against one another in September is going to be must-see viewing. We get past them and we're hosting the final in the U.S. Open Cup. That's a big deal. That's a big deal because that means you're moving on to the CONCACAF Champions Cup after that win. And I think this club got the healthiest dose of what it means to be successful in the Champions Cup in 2024 when Columbus made it to the final. I can't tell you the kind of attention the club got internationally as a result. But it really helped solidify the efforts of the ownership group in putting together a $315 million game stadium in the Arena District downtown, putting together a massive training center on the state fairgrounds and growing what we had already in historic Crew Stadium and modeling that facility after great European facilities where we get compliments from visitors and incoming players all the time about what's offered for players in that facility. We house all of the academy teams and the second team and first team in that building. And we create that chain where young players come in for training at 5 o'clock on a Thursday and they see the first team members finishing up in the weight room. And they're like, one day I'd like to be in that weight room myself. You don't go near that weight room until you're in the first team. So they've got a vision of what this can be for them if they apply themselves and if they're gifted and blessed enough to get to that point. So I really love the environment, the atmosphere, the club culture is terrific. And I think what bodes well for Columbus in the long run is going to be what we've got going right now. In the short run, you mentioned the half season that's left beyond the Open Cup. It's a gauntlet for both New York City, Columbus, and every other MLS team between now and at least the end of October. So 3 points is 3 points, and we're playing. It depends. I mean, if you're playing Eastern Conference teams and they're above you, you certainly want those 3 points. If you're playing a Western Conference team, you want to get that bonus 3 points and pull it back to your standings in the Eastern Conference table. Last 10 games are going to be a sprint. I can tell you that. The way things have settled in the middle third of the table in the Eastern Conference right now, I mean, the only team that's really running away from it is either Miami or Nashville. And then everybody else, I think, is in the conversation.
Yeah. Bill?
So I had a question about, obviously we're in the aftermath of the World Cup. I think that I've heard this, that, you have a lot of new fans now that, are following the Crew, following the MLS as a result of the World Cup, right? So my question is, how do you kind of do the balance for, like, you want to be informative for some of these new fans, but you also still want to give that in-depth, in-depth knowledge for some of the longtime supporters? Because, I mean, you've been covering the team a long time or been doing play-by-play for a long time. So I guess, how do you balance that, being informative for new fans while still giving the in-depth, knowledge for the longtime supporters?
Yeah, Bill, that's a great question. We were asking that same question back in the early 2000s, when I was doing television for the Chicago Fire.
Right.
It was, do I have to explain the offside rule?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's the most complicated rule in the book.
Right.
But it's not really that complicated. But there are so many nuances to it. And it feels like it changes every year with whether or not it's a finger or the torso or the lower leg or what have you. So, I think there are abbreviated ways to elaborate on circumstances within a game that don't insult the educated viewer, but maybe pull back the curtain a little bit for the person who's new. I don't know this for a fact, but I would almost guarantee there aren't a lot of new soccer fans listening to a broadcast on the radio. And I just don't feel like there are. I feel like you're educated, you know where to find it, your team,
right?
And you want to know what's going on because you can't see it somehow. You can't see the game.
Right.
And so that's the audience I'm speaking to. I think the thing that we saw last night in Leagues Cup, which was very interesting to me, and we have not seen it in the MLS regular season because I don't think the IFAB rules have applied to the MLS regular season just yet. They will apply next year, is that the referee was counting down on goal kicks and throw-ins, much like what we saw in the World Cup. So I like that. I don't know if it caught our players by surprise, but I did note that a couple of times both teams, maybe Columbus more so than Atlas, was rushed by what they saw was a countdown. So I think that's a really important point. What I did see is a lot more continual play, where we had a lot of Atlas players, I'm not going to say feigning injury, but they went down early and they went down often. The Columbus Crew in their, I think in the CONCACAF Champions Cup run in 2024, as a group, and I don't know this for a fact, but I could tell by the way they were playing, as a group playing Tigres and Monterrey and those that run up to the final, they agreed that unless the referee blows the whistle, we're not stopping for injuries, especially not for the opponent. We're going to keep playing. And I think in the Leagues Cup last year, actually scored a goal when one of the defenders for the Mexican opponent was down. And we didn't care. You know, if you're going to go down and try to stop play, whether it's in the attacking third for us or it's at midfield, you're going to pay the price. Right. We're just going to keep playing. I also think, though, that that's the quickness with which those players eventually got up was an affect of what we saw in the World Cup, where if we have to stop and we have to bring out a trainer, you're off the field for 2 minutes. There are no questions asked. Right. So unless it's a head injury, referee's not stopping play, unless you're bleeding and we have to stop play and you stay down on the field, we're going to, penalize you the 2 minutes before you can come back on. Yeah. So those are the things that I've noted. Those are the things that demand a little more explanation. But it's really quick. Right. It's the 5-second countdown to get the goal kick underway. Football Rules Committee said that's one of the many ways that we can keep the game moving, keep game action flowing. So you don't have to spend a lot of time on it. And I think that's worthwhile. And I also think it serves as a decent reminder to the educated fan too, that, hey, here's a rule that we haven't seen yet, but it's being employed in this Leagues Cup tournament.
Right. Nice. Do you have a follow-up to that, or Bill?
No.
All right. So, the one thing I'll say in this case about that, and credit to Fox and the way that they sort of handled certain things when it came to explaining the offside rule, because a lot of people that were watching the World Cup, whether it was U.S., whether it was not U.S., they didn't necessarily have an understanding of that rule versus, say, like, for example, hockey, and their offside rule. But I liked the video approach that they had and the animation on that. And I thought that was such a great way that they handled that for the average person, because the average person, even myself, when I first started covering it, I didn't really fully get it, because in my brain, I had a hockey mentality as far as how the offside rule worked, where it's just blue line arena. So I credit the Fox in that one for being able to really explain it on both levels, those that get it, those that don't. And it was something that I came away very impressed with. When it comes to the sport itself, and I think you're right. I think, people that tune in on the radio side, whether it's you here in, NYCFC, Roberto or Glenn, they're tuning in for, in a lot of ways, and your voice and your analysis and breakdown of the match itself, I think is a big factor in all of that, where it's the people that have been following the team for a while, the people that understand the sport as a whole. And that's where I think it's a benefit on both sides there. Now I don't believe at this point Apple TV has set it up to have the road radio, I think, set up, right? Have they done that? Have they fixed that yet? They haven't. They still haven't fixed that. All right. So that's, 3 more years, that may not matter. But
well, one of the reasons why that happens is because a lot of road radio doesn't go on the road. A lot of opposing radio, away radio, does not go on the road. Yep. So you can't sync up a signal from a stadium that's unoccupied without a TV truck. Scott, it's funny that you bring up Fox. I was very impressed with Fox's coverage during the World Cup. And with regards to the offside rule and the way they displayed it, and your hockey mentality, I mean, back in the North American Soccer League days, we did have the 35-yard line where you couldn't be offside until you got to the other side of that line. And that was one of the rules that they instituted to keep the game flowing, and to give an advantage to attacking play, and in so doing, hopefully create more goals and create more eyeballs on a game or on a team. With regards to offside, what's interesting about the laws of the game, when you look at the laws of the game book, some of the best explanations about the offside rule are actually done in illustration. Yeah. So that you can get an idea of what's offside and what's not. And so if Fox stole that page from the laws of the game and said, you know what, we're going to give them a few graphics and let them see it for themselves, I think that's really smart when it comes to educating the viewer.
It worked. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Bill, you got anything?
Well, yeah, I had another question with just in regard to like, I know you've done some broader MLS commentary, right? You've done, and then obviously you're team specific. So, I guess my question: how do you prepare differently when calling a crew match versus calling the national or league wide coverage?
So I haven't done any league-wide games. I did one many years ago.
Okay.
This was back when each of the local markets paid for broadcast coverage of their teams. So
Okay.
the Chicago Fire would pay the truck to be in the parking lot for home games,
Okay.
and then they would ship talent to away games, and they would split the feed at the other facility and give Chicago their feed, and then say, for example, Dallas would have their feed from the same truck with two separate announcers. I did a league feed many years ago in San Jose when San Jose was playing at San Jose State. And I worked with the play-by-play guy of San Jose's earthquakes, and I did the analysis, and we were both in the same booth on the same broadcast going to two different markets. That was very interesting because some of the post-game criticism I got came from San Jose fans. And I'm sure Chicago fans got on the San Jose guy, for whatever he did wrong. So that was a very interesting experience. I think when you're a neutral and you're calling a game TV or radio for any team in any sport, you have to make sure that your storylines are balanced for both squads because the storylines are going to be different. And you have to be sure to dedicate equal time to both of those, sides of the table. When I did Big Ten college games, when I did international games for Fox, it was really about understanding where each team was in either the tournament or in league play. And then from there, taking the expectations from coaching staffs and applying them to what we were seeing on the field. And then just judging it as objectively as you possibly could. The great thing about being a home announcer is, and I'm sure Roberto and Glenn have talked about this before, maybe not Roberto because he's a little more international in the sense that he covers so much more, but being able to connect with the fans on a weekly basis is one of my favorite parts of what I do. I am in a job that my personality is cut out for. I want to be, I just want to be considered part of the group. If I had to go to a different market every week and call a game, I could certainly do it, but I wouldn't have as much fun. And the support from both the club as well as the supporter base in Columbus has been second to none. So I'm very fortunate to be where I am and to be able to talk to guys like you about it. It is way more enjoyable to watch a player develop over several years rather than parachute into a market for a week and then leave and parachute into the next market. I get the opportunity to listen to coaches evolve in the way that they approach situations with their teams. Wilfried Nancy was not brilliant from the get-go, and he had moments of what appeared to be brilliance over the course of time. But I can tell you what didn't change from the moment that I met him was that he is a true romantic about the game of soccer. And when he talks about it, it's like he's reading a love novel, a romance novel. Because he's so soft-spoken and he can tell you the nuances, and those are the things that he loves about this sport. So, and that's the way he thinks about it too, in really soft edges. And it's a really beautiful thing. Laurent Courtois is, I would not say necessarily a disciple of Wilfried Nancy, though they did work a lot together when Courtois was coaching Crew 2 and Wilfried was coaching the first team, because they had to be on the same page so they could interchange players. But I think Courtois has a lot of his own ideas about the way this game has to be played. And I think we're seeing it. And certainly on the level of personal relationships in the locker room and treating players like human beings, he may actually be better than Wilfried at that. And you're getting and seeing the response from the locker room week in and week out.
That's interesting because that's the thing when you and I think when you cover a sport, you get to know them beyond the jersey number.
Yeah.
And that's the other side of it, I think, to a degree that, we know the players, we know their families, and you kind of like, so, when you see certain things happen or they get transferred out, you feel like this internal sense of loss because you've known them for years, you build the rapport, you've shared laughs, and then you might never see them again. And it's a weird moving away kind of a feeling, I think. But at the same time, it does generate an intrigue and a curiosity. You mentioned, Courtois and all this. It's like, what can they bring to the table? What is their personality type going to be like? And hearing that, the players resonate with that sort of a soft-spoken. I love that. I personally love that. In such a huge way, because typically a lot of times what will end up happening is you get like the soft head coach, and this is just sports, I think in general. You get the soft head coach, then you got the tough one. And then back and forth sort of a, kind of an approach. But I love this sort of thing because at the end of the day, this is just maybe me thinking my own way, these are still kids,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we forget, I think a lot of times that they're 20, 25 years old, even, at our age, we can even say 30's still a kid. But, you see these players that are 22, 23 years old and you think, where was I at that age? And what kind of support would have I needed back then?
Right. Yeah. They're grown kids playing a kid's game.
Mhm.
And in many cases getting paid decently for it. Very, very, very well for it.
But we also forget, I think, the amount of effort that went in, years of dedication and practice and self-doubt, and boy, there's so much pressure on those kids, even as a teenager.
Yeah, I think one of the common threads from what I've seen of both Wilfried Nancy as well as Laurent Courtois, and to a lesser degree, Caleb Porter and Henrik Rudstrom, is that the players who get the endorsement from the coach to believe in themselves are the players who will step to the next level rather quickly. I think Max Arston said it best when he, credited his coaches in Columbus for helping him to get over himself and believe in himself. And understand that what they see is something that he can do.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the kind of messaging he's getting on and off the field, then it certainly backs the development that we've watched over the last 3 seasons of his growth, in terms of comfort and becoming a regular starter, then becoming a part of the men's national team, and eventually getting to the World Cup.
Yeah. Bill, we'll wrap up, I think, in a couple minutes. Bill, you have anything?
So I know you mentioned about doing broadcast solo.
Yeah.
That's got to be difficult. I know, just from my experience in podcasting, I do a Pittsburgh show on Wednesdays, and usually there's me and 3 to 4 other co-hosts, and then sometimes I do some solo stuff, for an hour. And I mean, no comparison, I know, but I'm just trying to, I guess, wrap my head around it. Like that has to be energy draining. Like, how do you first off, how do you keep the broadcast flowing? and then secondly, how do you sustain the energy? Because like I said, it's gotta be tough.
Well, I think at one point it was probably difficult, Bill, but like the players, I have to develop a certain amount of match day fitness.
Right.
So I can tell you that my first broadcast of the year doesn't sound like my 8th or 9th.
Yeah.
It was a little rough for me getting back after 8 weeks off, sitting in a booth for 3 hours and hosting a pregame show as well as covering the game. I think the benefit that I have, number one, is that I've got a passion for the sport and the way it needs to be played, or the way it should be played. I have a great passion for the club and the way they want to play. I have nothing better to do than to sit in a booth and get paid for it. That's not true. But I have substantial support from my wife, who is, my best friend and teammate when it comes to, spending a day prepping, going to press conferences, and then eventually getting off to the stadium. But then beyond that, the blessing of a game in front of me and the responsibility to describe it to people who can't see it is something I take very seriously. And I'm honored to have the chance to do it. I'm blessed to have the ability to translate what I see with the words that I use for the audience that can't see it. And the passion is something that comes very naturally because of all the other things I just listed.
Right.
So, you know, I'm a little bit older. I don't have kids at home. My life is pretty darn easy. The work I do, I'm grateful for, but I love to death, and I don't think I could get as excited, you know, doing this weekend's San Jose RSL game. But if you put me in front of a mic for any Columbus Crew game, because of what I feel for the club and what I know of the club and the way that club treats me, then you'll absolutely get 100% from start to finish.
Nice. And also, like you mentioned before, the fact that you've built up the rapport with the fan base too, that they recognize the voice, you know, I think is also a big part of that too. I mean, you've earned a place with the squad, with the team as a whole, because of the dedication you've provided to this squad for so long. And despite all the changes, despite the ups and the downs, they know your voice and they know you. And
well, that's nice of you to say, Scott. I appreciate that.
But in that, you know, I mean,
there is comfort. Yeah.
Because
there's comfort in it, but there's also a real need to kind of keep it in check too.
Fair.
Because like what we saw with the Columbus Blue Jackets this week, and what, you know, this honestly the same thing we saw with the previous owner with the Columbus Crew. They did the same thing in 2016 or 2017. They cut radio and they simulcasted television audio on radio. And that was a true disservice to anybody who couldn't watch the game.
Right.
But in this role, you know, I recognize how special it is. I know your good friend Glenn Crooks and Robert feel the same way. Tom down in Cincinnati feels the same way about the work that he does, and he spent, you know, several years as the television guy. Some people would call it a demotion to go from TV to radio. I actually don't think that's the case. I think it's a professional challenge that we have to overcome. I think Tom Galerder with FC Cincinnati has absolutely embraced that. Dave Leno in Philadelphia, same way. Spent years as the TV guy for the Union, and then when Apple came along, he went back to radio, and I know he's beloved by the Union group. So we're all really fortunate to be in this role, and you know, I hope it continues, because no matter what the league wants to do with the media deal on a national level in the future, I think it's important that there are local voices who stand out for the local teams. And it's a great honor for me to stand out for Columbus.
Love it. Appreciate that, Big. Last two things in this case, and I'll let you go after that. Number one, is there anything you want to say to the fans? And two, where can we find you on socials?
You know, I'm excited for New York City FC fans because I know you have a new stadium coming online
I think
next
Columbus
year.
fans.
What?
I think the Columbus
the
fans.
Columbus fans? Oh, they hear me all the time. I'm on the air 3 days this week. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's true.
They've heard enough. No, I absolutely adore our Columbus supporters. They've been great confidence builders for me, and certainly have welcomed my wife and I into the fold. And I think you know, I hope they understand that the respect is mutual between the two of us. And I'm excited for the league. I think the League's Cup is a tremendous tournament. I hope people start paying attention to it a little bit more. And I hope it gets nestled into the right spot when we start the new calendar next year. And if it's in the same spot, so be it. You know, get a couple of league games under your belt, just like Liga MX, and then move on to League's Cup, and we'll see how everybody, you know, filters out through that. So I'm excited about where this League's Cup thing goes. And then beyond that, looking forward to the calendar change and hopefully long sleeve Adidas jerseys for all the teams for the winter games.
Yeah.
Nice. And socials. Anything you want to promote?
Chris Doran 18 on Twitter.
What's that?
Yeah, Chris Doran 18 on X, and I'm on Instagram very rarely. And Facebook is a long forgotten format for me. I don't spend a lot of time, you know, as a radio guy. We sit in booths, we sit in studios, we're by ourselves, we're talking to the audience. When I have the opportunity to talk to people face to face, I'd much rather do that than interact online. But, there's news that has to get out there, and certainly on occasion, my opinion too. But beyond that, you can find me on X.
Love it. So appreciate it. So thanks as always. Here's to the future of the sport. Like I said earlier, and I feel the need to double back to this real quick. There is a youth movement with this, and it'll be exciting to see what happens over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. And see what, like I said, what the future holds going forward. So anyway, appreciate the time, sir. I'm Scott. That's Bill. Stream Punk Soccer as always, and appreciate it. Stay well and have a great one.